Picture this. It's the Wednesday before Memorial Day weekend. You've got your plans, maybe a barbecue, maybe a trip to the beach. You live in a quiet neighborhood in Orange County. You've lived there for years. And then out of nowhere, you get word that you need to leave. Not just you, but your entire neighborhood. Tens of thousands of people told to grab what they can and go. That's exactly what happened to roughly 50,000 residents across 6 cities: Garden Grove, Cypress, Stanton, West Anaheim, Buena Park, and Westminster, when a chemical storage tank at a facility called GKN Aerospace started overheating and releasing toxic fumes into the air. The governor declared a state of emergency. The president signed a federal emergency declaration, and people were left asking, how does something like this happen in the middle of one of the most densely populated regions in the United States? Today we're going to break all of it down. Who GKN is, what they actually do, what went wrong, why federal agents raided the facility, and maybe most importantly, why this story matters even if you live nowhere near Garden Grove. Because this isn't just a local news story. This is about what happens when a corporation decides that cutting corners is cheaper than following the rules, and who pays the price when they're wrong. So let's start with who we're actually talking about here, because GKN Aerospace is not some small mom and pop operation. GKN Aerospace is a global company based in the United Kingdom. They manufacture cockpit windows, jet canopies, and windshields for commercial and military aircraft, including parts used in spacecraft. They operate 32 manufacturing locations across 12 countries. They have 16,000 employees worldwide. And their parent company, Melrose Industries, reported revenues of up to about $5.3 billion US in 2026. Their Garden Grove facility has been operating on Western Avenue since 1993. That's over 30 years of industrial manufacturing in the middle of a residential neighborhood in Orange County. And here's something worth noting. In 2018, GKN Aerospace was acquired by Melrose Industries through a hostile takeover. Following that takeover, GKN moved to shrink its global manufacturing footprint from 51 plants down to 33. Closures happened across North America and Europe. I'm not saying that's a direct cause of what happened in Garden Grove, but it is context. And context matters when we talk about what this company knew, when they knew it, and what they chose to do or not do about it. On the afternoon of May 21st at around 3:30 in the afternoon, GKN Aerospace employees noticed something alarming. Temperature readings were spiking in one of their chemical storage tanks. The tank was a 34,000 gallon tank containing approximately 6,000 to 7,000 gallons of chemical called methyl methacrylate, or MA. Now, you may not have heard of methyl methacrylate before, but you've definitely encountered it. It's the chemical used to make acrylic plastics, things like plexiglass, dental prosthetics, and aerospace grade transparent materials. It's also highly flammable, highly volatile, and when it overheats, it can self-react, meaning it generates its own heat, making it nearly impossible to cool down through normal means. That's pretty freaking scary. And that's exactly what was happening. The tank was heating itself. When fire crews arrived and tried to relieve pressure by opening the valves were broken, gummed up, inoperable. Division Chief Craig Covey of the Orange County Fire Authority described it bluntly. He said, "We were unable to offload the material through the systems that it has." By Friday the 22nd, the situation had gone from serious to critical. Authorities feared what's called a BLEVE, a boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion. Yeah, sounds scary. If that tank had let go, we'd be talking about a catastrophic blast and a toxic chemical plume spreading across one of the most populated counties in California. Evacuation orders went out and kept expanding, covering parts of Garden Grove, West Anaheim, Cypress, Stanton, Buena Park, and Westminster. At its peak, up to 50,000 people were displaced. Schools closed, businesses shut down. The governor declared a state of emergency, and then President Trump signed a federal emergency declaration on May 25th. The crisis broke not because of anything fire crews did, but because of a crack. A crack formed in the tank wall, which accidentally relieved the internal pressure that had been building for days. Officials confirmed by the morning of May 25th that the explosion threat was gone. A crack saved 50,000 people. Let that sink in. A crack, an accidental crack. Now that same crack scared me because I thought, okay, well, where are the vapors going that are getting let out through that crack, right? Where are the chemicals that are leaking out through that crack going? Are they going in our lungs? Here's where the story goes from a tragedy to something that demands a real conversation, because this wasn't out of nowhere. There is a paper trail, and it goes back years. In 2018, 8 years before this crisis, California's Department of Industrial Relations cited GKN Aerospace for improperly cooling and covering its chemical storage tanks. I'll say that again. Improperly cooling chemical storage tanks. That is precisely what failed in May 2026. Then in 2020, the South Coast Air Quality Management District conducted an inspection and found multiple violations. GKN was using chemicals beyond what their permits allowed. They exceeded emissions limits, they failed to keep complete records, and they were operating equipment without proper permits. These violations led to a settlement. In 2021, GKN Aerospace paid nearly $1 million to the AQMD. $1 million for a company reporting over $5 billion in annual revenue. That is not a deterrent. That is just a rounding error on a spreadsheet. So of course, it didn't stop there. In 2022, OSHA issued another fine. In March 2025, just 2 months before the crisis, GKN received fresh notices to comply. And earlier in 2025, they settled yet another case with the AQMD for over $900,000. Chump change, in my opinion. Since 2018, federal OSHA inspected this facility 4 times and issued 10 citations. 10. The violations included failures related to exact types of equipment inspection and safety procedures that are now at the center of the federal investigation. And what happened after each fine? They paid up, admitted no wrongdoing, and kept operating. The regulators cited. The company settled. Nothing fundamentally changed until a tank almost exploded next to my house. Now we get to the part that brought this story back into headlines this week. On June 10th, agents from the FBI and the Environmental Protection Agency showed up at the GKN Aerospace facility in Garden Grove with a search warrant signed by a federal judge on June 4th. We're not talking about a routine inspection. We're talking about a criminal investigation. Agents searched multiple buildings on the property, and they were seizing evidence of potential violations of federal law, specifically a section of Title 42 that requires companies to prevent the accidental release of extremely hazardous substances into the air. When GKN was asked to comment, they issued a prepared statement. We are cooperating with authorities at our Garden Grove facility and will continue to do so. Short, careful, corporate. Orange County District Attorney Todd Spitzer had quite a bit more to say. He noted that the DA's office had already launched a parallel investigation, including drone surveillance of the facility and an anonymous whistleblower tip line. And he said he welcomed any additional federal and regulatory review to ensure that the 50,000 victims receive the full restitution to which they are entitled. He used the word victims, and he used the word criminal. That's the Orange County District Attorney, and that's not a small thing. I want to take a step back here, because if you're watching this from somewhere that isn't Orange County, you might be wondering why this story should even matter to you. Well, here's why. GKN Aerospace supplies parts for commercial and military aircraft. If you've ever flown on a commercial flight, there's a real chance you've looked through a window or windshield manufactured at a facility just like this one. This isn't some obscure industrial company. This is a defense contractor operating in a densely populated American neighborhood. And that raises questions that matter in every state, every city that has an industrial facility near a residential area. What does it take for a company to actually be held accountable? Not fined, not cited, actually freaking accountable. Because here's the reality. GKN paid over $1.5 million in fines across multiple settlements, and the facility just kept running. It took a tank nearly exploding and 50,000 people being forced out of their homes for anyone to say enough. Well, we'll see if it actually is enough. If you live in the area, if you know someone who was displaced, or if this story just hit you somewhere deep, please drop a comment. Let's talk to each other. Let's communicate. Let's share our experiences and get this stuff stopped across the country. Share this video, please. This is exactly the kind of story that needs to be seen. Thank you for watching.